Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today, we're taking a journey into the world of a real titan of music, Ludwig van Beethoven.
Yeah, his name is obviously known everywhere, his music too. But we want to go a bit beyond just, the famous tunes.
Exactly. We're aiming to unpack some key parts of his life, his really groundbreaking music, and, well, the enigma that still surrounds him. And this is all, as always, for you, our curious listeners.
For this deep dive, we've looked at quite a range of things: biographical details, analyses of his big works, and the historical context he was living in. It's a fascinating period.
It really is. So the mission for you today, to get a deeper, maybe more nuanced feel for Beethoven's incredible life and legacy. We'll pull out the most important and most intriguing bits. Okay, let's get started.
All right, let's begin where it all started, Bonn.
Resonance Podcast. If you like the content, please consider liking and subscribing.
He was born there in December 1770, though interestingly, he himself thought he was born in 1772 for some reason.
That's quite funny, getting your own birth year wrong. His baptism was December 17th, 1770. That's documented.
Yeah, standard practice back then. And his family background is, well, it's revealing. Flemish roots, traced back to Malines.
And his grandfather, also Ludwig van Beethoven, was actually quite respected, wasn't he? A Kapellmeister.
That's right, a music director. So music was definitely in the blood. His father, Johann, was a court singer too, but, well, he struggled quite badly with alcoholism.
Oh, okay. So that casts a bit of a shadow. What about his mother?
His mother, Maria Magdalena Keverich, came from a family with maybe slightly higher social standing. Her father was a head chef at court, I believe.
So, a mix there. Musical heritage, some social standing, but a difficult home situation because of the father's drinking. Sounds tough. He had two younger brothers who survived too, Caspar and Johann.
Yes, and that hardship at home was pretty significant. Johann, the father, was obsessed with the idea of Ludwig being another Mozart, a child prodigy.
Right, that kind of pressure.
Exactly. So the lessons started young, around age 5. They were often really rigid, even brutal. Reports mentioned beatings, being dragged out of bed to practice.
Oh, wow. That's intense. And money was tight, too.
Very tight, especially after the grandfather died and the father's drinking got worse. Ludwig actually became the main breadwinner for the family by the time he was 18. He had already left school around age 11.
Left school at 11 to focus on music, presumably.
Pretty much. And at his first public performance, aged 8, his father tried to pass him off as 6. To make him seem even more prodigious.
You can see why he might have developed a distaste for the whole child prodigy thing later on, can't you?
Absolutely. It seems likely. Thankfully, he did find a really positive influence in Christian Gottlob Neef.
Yes, Neef. He became his teacher around age 9.
Correct. And Neef seems to have provided a much better, more supportive education. Piano, organ, violin, composition, theory. He really saw Beethoven's talent.
And encouraged him to compose.
Yes, and crucially, introduced him to the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. That was a huge influence throughout Beethoven's life.
So Neef was key. And the talent was showing early on, wasn't it? Those first compositions.
Yeah, the keyboard variations on that Dressler, March in 1783, then the 3 piano sonatas dedicated to the Elector Maximilian Friedrich. Pretty impressive for a young teenager.
And he got court positions quite young, too.
Assistant court organist, unpaid at first in 82, then paid from 84. And he was playing continuo for the Bonn Opera by 1783. Great practical experience.
But the formal schooling didn't go so well. You said he left around 10 or 11.
That's right. Reports suggest he struggled with things like maths and spelling some. Wonder if there might have been mild dyslexia.
Interesting. He himself said something like, "Music comes to me more readily than words." Right?
Exactly. It clearly shows where his true abilities lay.
Okay, then there's that first trip to Vienna in 1787. He was 17. Big deal, heading to the musical capital.
Huge deal. The plan, apparently, was to try and study with Mozart. Maybe Count Waldstein helped arrange it.
And the story goes that Mozart was impressed.
Yeah, the famous anecdote is Mozart heard him improvise and said something like, "Keep an eye on him. He'll make a noise in the world someday." Whether it happened exactly like that, well, the documentation's a bit thin.
Still a great story. But the trip got cut short.
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
He only stayed about 2 weeks. He got news his mother was seriously ill and had to rush back to Bonn.
And she passed away soon after he returned.
Yes, sadly. It really highlights the heavy family responsibilities he had, especially with his father's ongoing issues. It was the elector, Maximilian Franz, who later gave him leave for the permanent move.
So Bonn was this crucible of hardship and talent, but Vienna was where his future really lay. He moved there for good in 1792.
Right. Never lived in Bonn again. He still had some financial backing from the elector, initially.
And that famous encouragement from Count Waldstein. Receive Mozart's spirit from Haydn's hands. Quite the send-off.
It's quite an expectation, doesn't it? And Vienna was just brimming with opportunity then, the musical center of Europe.
So he dives straight into studying with the big names. Haydn.
Yes, he started composition lessons with Haydn, though their relationship wasn't exactly smooth sailing. Reports suggest some tension there. Beethoven felt Haydn wasn't correcting his work carefully enough, maybe.
Interesting. So he sought out others, too.
He did. Yeah. He studied counterpoint with Johann Georg Albrechtsberger, a real master of that craft, and vocal writing with Antonio Salieri, covering all the bases.
But his initial splash in Vienna wasn't really as a composer, was it? More as a performer.
Absolutely. He first made his mark as a powerhouse pianist, a real virtuoso. His improvisation skills were apparently legendary, some even said better than Mozart's.
Wow, and that talent opened doors with the aristocracy.
Definitely. His playing got him into those influential noble circles. That was his way in.
And those early compositions, they still had that classical feel. Haydn and Mozart's influence is clear.
Oh, yes. Very much in that style, often featuring the piano, naturally. His first published works, the Opus 1 piano trios from 1795, were dedicated to Prince Lichnowsky.
Lichnowsky became a major early scorer, right? Gave him an allowance.
Yes, an annual allowance, which was crucial financial help. Then you have pieces like the Piano Sonata No Pay, the Pathétique, Opus 13. That really cemented his reputation as a serious composer and pianist.
Pathétique. And the Moonlight, Sonata No. 14, Opus 27, Number 2. Even people who don't know classical music know the Moonlight.
Exactly, iconic pieces. And his first symphony premiered in 1800, a big step onto the orchestral stage.
And didn't he dedicate some early sonatas, Opus 2, to Haydn, despite the tensions?
He did. An interesting gesture, maybe acknowledging his lineage even if the lessons were tricky. By 1800, Beethoven was definitely a sought-after figure in Vienna, both for playing and composing.
But you can already hear hints, can't you? Even in the early stuff, there's this dramatic intensity and emotional depth starting to brew.
For sure, which leads us into what's often called his heroic middle period, kicking off around 1802. This feels like a real pivot point.
Yeah, a massive shift. And it's tied so closely to his deafness, isn't it? The realization that it was getting worse.
Absolutely central. The Heiligenstadt Testament from 1802. It's just devastating to read. He writes about his despair, isolation, even thoughts of suicide because of the hearing loss, but then this incredible resolve to live for his art.
It's heartbreaking, but so powerful, that decision to pour everything into music despite this huge personal crisis.
It unleashed this torrent of creativity. The music from this period, it just explodes with expanded forms, heightened drama, this sense of struggle leading to, well, triumph. It often feels like a hero's journey set to music.
And the Third Symphony, the Eroica, is the prime example, right?
Totally. Symphony No. 3, Opus 55, it just blew the doors off symphonic conventions. The length, the emotional range, the complexity, and that whole story with the dedication to Napoleon.
Right. He admired Napoleon initially, then Napoleon declares himself emperor, and Beethoven furiously scratches out the dedication.
Yeah, it changes it to something like to celebrate the memory of a great man. It shows his passionate belief in ideals and heroism and liberty.
Amazing. And this period also gives us the Fifth Symphony, that opening. Da-da-da-dum.
Unforgettable. And the Sixth, the Pastoral Symphony, which is so different, all about nature, 5 movements, descriptive titles like Seen by the Brook, Thunderstorm, very programmatic.
Yeah, painting pictures with music. And his only opera, Fidelio, fits in here too. Themes of freedom, love conquering oppression.
Yes, Fidelio, Opus 72, plus the amazing piano concertos, like No. 5, the Emperor Concerto, Opus 73. It's just an unbelievably productive and groundbreaking time frame. He's mastering everything.
Truly expanding beyond the piano. Okay, so after this heroic explosion, things shift again around 1815 into the late period.
That's right. And the character changes quite dramatically. By now, his deafness is profound, almost total.
And the music becomes much more inward-looking, introspective.
Exactly. It's marked by this incredible intellectual depth, loads of formal experimentation. He's really pushing boundaries and this intensely personal, sometimes quite raw, emotional expression.
And he started really digging into older music then, too, Bach and Handel.
Yes, a deep study. You see him incorporating things like complex counterpoint, fugues, older forms, but weaving them into something completely new and forward-looking.
Which leads to these monumental, maybe sometimes challenging later work.
Definitely challenging for audiences at the time, and sometimes still today, but incredibly profound. The Ninth Symphony, Opus 125, is the obvious giant here.
The choral symphony, bringing in singers for the final movement, setting Schiller's Ode to Joy. Just revolutionary.
Massive statement about universal brotherhood. Then you have the piano sonatas, like the huge Note 29, the Hammerklavier, Opus 106, technically fearsome, incredibly expressive.
I've heard pianists talk about the Hammerklavier with a kind of awe and terror.
Understandably. And then there are the late string quartets, Opus 127, 130, 131, 132, 135, plus the Gross Fuge, Opus 133. These are just, well, they're on another level.
Profound, enigmatic, exploring really deep emotional and spiritual territory.
Absolutely. And the huge mass, the Missa Solemnis, Opus 123. Another epic work from this late phase. It's interesting, his output seems to dip a bit for a few years, then really surges again from about 1818 onwards.
And these late works, while maybe difficult initially, are now seen as just peak achievements, hugely influential.
Immensely influential, pushing music into completely new places.
Okay, let's focus a bit more directly on the hearing loss itself. It's such a crucial part of his story. It started around 1798. He was only in his late 20s.
Yeah, about 28. He started noticing tinnitus, that ringing or buzzing, and difficulty hearing higher sounds. For a musician,
Yeah.
devastating.
Must have been terrifying, and it just got progressively worse.
Steadily worse, yes. By around 1815, so mid-40s, he was considered functionally or near totally deaf.
And the emotional impact. We mentioned the Heiligenstadt Testament, the despair, the isolation.
It's hard to overstate. Losing the very sense that connects you to your art, your profession, your social life, it forced him to withdraw from performing, which he loved, and made communication incredibly difficult.
How did he manage? You hear about conversation books.
Exactly. People would write down their side of the conversation for him. He also tried various ear trumpets and gadgets, even things to try and feel the piano's vibrations through resonance plates.
But to keep composing masterpieces, all deaf, it's just mind-boggling.
It really is. It speaks volumes about his inner musical ear, his imagination. Perhaps because the loss was gradual, he was able to internalize sounds, to hear complex music entirely in his head.
It's an incredible feat of resilience and inner genius. Did the deafness itself actually shape the style of his music, do we think?
Well, that's debated. Some musicologists have suggested that maybe in the earlier stages he focused more on middle and lower notes because he could hear them better. You see hints of this in some analyses of, say, string quartets.
But then later, when he was totally deaf,
Paradoxically, the very high notes come back strongly in the late works. It suggests his inner imagination took over completely, unbound by what he could physically hear. Overall, the late works definitely become more complex, more inward-looking, maybe reflecting that withdrawal into his own unique world of sound.
fascinating interplay between limitation and creation. Okay, let's touch back on some of those incredible masterpieces, maybe genre by genre. The symphonies first, he really revolutionized them.
Oh, completely. The Eroica, Symphony No. 3, just smashed the mold. Its length, its drama, its emotional weight, it changed what a symphony could be. And the Napoleon Connection highlights his engagement with the world.
Then the Pastoral, No. 6, showing a totally different side, that love of nature, the programmatic elements, almost like musical paintings.
Vivid depictions, the brook, the peasants dancing, the storm.
Yeah.
Really innovative. And then, of course, the Ninth, the choral. Adding voices was just unprecedented in a symphony. That finale is still electrifying.
A universal anthem. And the piano sonatas, they feel almost like a personal laboratory for him.
Absolutely. You trace his whole development through them. The Moonlight, so evocative. The Pathétique, so dramatic and passionate right from that slow introduction.
And the late ones like the Hammerklavier pushing the piano and the player to their absolute limits.
Monumental works, showing the instrument's full expressive range. And his chamber music, especially the string quartets.
Yeah, the late quartets are often talked about as his deepest, most personal statements.
They really are. The early Op. 18 quartets show him mastering the Haydn Mozart style, but with his own voice already emerging. But the late ones, Op. 127 through 135, plus the Gross Fuge, they're just something else entirely. Intense, experimental, profound, sometimes quite challenging harmonically. They're peak quartet writing.
Essential listening for anyone wanting to understand late Beethoven and concertos. Opera.
Huge contributions. The 5 piano concertos are staples, the violin concerto too. And Fidelio, his only opera, is a powerful piece about justice and freedom, even though it gave him a lot of trouble with revisions.
So across the board, he wasn't just writing in genres, he was fundamentally changing them. Which brings us to his influence.
Massive. He's the key figure bridging the classical and romantic eras. He took the forms he inherited and just injected them with so much more emotional power, structural innovation.
And the composers who came after him, Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, Wagner, they all had to grapple with Beethoven's shadow, didn't they?
Absolutely. He basically set the agenda for much of 19th century music. Ushered in the romantic sensibility, the focus on individual expression, on drama, on pushing boundaries.
How did he transform specific genres, thinking about influence?
Well, the symphony became this huge, dramatic statement, often carrying philosophical weight. He expanded the orchestra, too. The piano sonata became much more virtuosic and deeply expressive. The string quartet gained this incredible depth and complexity, especially with the late ones. The concerto, a bigger dialogue between soloist and orchestra. And the sheer difficulty of his music pushed performers to become better, more technically skilled.
And it wasn't just the music itself, was it? He kind of changed the idea of what a composer was.
Yeah, the Beethovenian ideal, they call it. The artist as this heroic individual wrestling with fate, expressing a powerful inner vision. He also navigated that shift away from relying solely on aristocratic patrons.
Right, becoming more independent through publishing, concerts, commissions.
Exactly. His forceful personality, his absolute belief in his art, it really shaped the modern image of the composer as this independent creative genius.
Speaking of that personality, he sounds like quite a character. Complex, contradictory.
Oh, definitely. Very intense, passionate, famously quick-tempered, but also capable of humor and deep loyalty. Stubborn, often quite dismissive of social niceties, prone to suspicion.
Sounds like hard work sometimes. And those meticulous habits, the 60 coffee beans every morning.
Yes,
Yeah.
precisely 60. And he never married, did he? Though there were these intense attachments to women who were usually unavailable, Antony Brentano, Giulietta Guicciardi, Josephine Brunswick, the immortal beloved mystery.
Ugh. Ah, the famous unsent letter. And his relationship with his nephew Carl was really difficult, wasn't it?
Very fraught. A long custody battle, lots of conflict. It caused Beethoven a huge amount of stress in his later years.
What about his relationships with other musicians? Haydn, we mentioned, was tense.
Yes, respect was there, but creative friction too. He met Goethe, the great writer, in 1812, but they didn't really hit it off, very different personalities.
And Mozart, did they actually meet?
That brief 1787 trip is the only possibility. The story persists, but solid proof is lacking. He definitely studied with Salieri, and Schubert deeply admired him, visited him near the end.
These little connections are fascinating, and the anecdotes really paint a picture storming out of places, being turned around to see the applause for the Ninth Symphony because he couldn't hear it.
Poignant, isn't it? And that amazing quote to Prince Lichnowsky, "Prince, what you are by accident of birth. What I am through myself. There is only one Beethoven."
Wow. That says it all about his self-belief and defiance of the class system.
Absolutely. Which ties into the historical context, right? He lived through incredibly turbulent times.
Late 18th, early 19th century, Enlightenment ideals, the French Revolution.
Liberty, equality, fraternity, and the Napoleonic Wars sweeping across Europe, the Congress of Vienna trying to put things back together. All of this is swirling around him.
And you feel it in the music, don't you? That initial embrace of revolutionary ideals in the Eroica, for example.
Definitely. And culturally, it's that shift from classical poise to romantic expression, individualism, the role of artists changing, becoming more independent. Beethoven really embodies that transition.
But he still needed patrons, like Prince Lichnowsky, Archduke Rudolph.
Yes, it was a complex relationship. He relied on their support, but fiercely guarded his artistic independence. He believed his talent was its own form of nobility,
Oh.
What I am through myself.
Quite a balancing act. Okay, before we wrap up, let's share some of those other intriguing, maybe lesser-known bits about him.
Yeah, there are some great ones. Like
Yeah.
the birth date confusion we mentioned, baptized 17th, 1770, probably born the 16th, but he thought it was 72.
And those wild rumors that he was Frederick the Great's illegitimate son.
Right. Completely unfounded, but they circulated. And apparently, despite the mathematical genius in his music, he really struggled with basic arithmetic.
That's brilliant. And the 60 coffee beans, we mentioned that? What
Look.
about favorite food?
Macaroni and cheese, reportedly. Which sounds surprisingly normal.
It does. Contemporaries often described him as clumsy, quite untidy in appearance.
Yeah, not exactly known for his neatness. And that habit of pouring cold water over his head before composing, trying to stimulate the brain, I guess.
whatever works. And we touched on the possible Mozart encounter. What about finances?
He managed his own affairs, dealt with publishers, owned bank shares, a freelance artist in many ways, but he definitely had money worries at times.
And his health wasn't just the deafness, was it?
No, he suffered from chronic stomach problems, liver disease. Various ailments plagued him. Recent DNA analysis of hair suggested possible lead poisoning, but whether that caused the deafness or other issues isn't confirmed.
Even his last words are debated. Pity. Pity too late. Referring to wine is one version.
That's one popular account, yeah. Seems even his death had a touch of drama. And apparently, despite everything he achieved, he felt he hadn't reached his artistic goals.
That's incredible, seeing art as limitless.
He really did. A true believer in Enlightenment ideals, hated class barriers even while navigating the aristocratic world. And his funeral, huge crowds, maybe 10,000 to 30,000 people turned out in Vienna, shows the impact he'd made.
An amazing turnout. A testament to his stature. Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've covered quite a journey from those tough beginnings in Bonn.
Through his revolutionary musical path in Vienna, the huge impact of his hearing loss, those iconic masterpieces.
His transformative influence on music history, that complex personality, the world he lived in, and some of those surprising little details.
It really is a story of incredible resilience, isn't it? Just this unwavering commitment to his art against unbelievable odds, leaving this timeless legacy.
Absolutely. Which leads us to our final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about all the challenges Beethoven faced, especially the deafness. How does knowing that affect how you hear his music? How does it change your appreciation of what he achieved?
Yeah, what part of his story or which piece of his music really resonates with you now? Is there something you feel inspired to go and explore further?
Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Beethoven. This is Resonance Podcast. Thank you for stopping by. Please like and subscribe if you like the content.
Thank you.
Goodbye.